The first type of figurative language we're going to learn about is probably something you've actually already learned about, and maybe you know it quite well. We're going to talk about metaphors. A metaphor is, the definition of it is a comparison between two unlike things or concepts. So this, if you need to pause the video here to get this down, this is the definition part. It's pretty simple definition, but I think looking at multiple examples kind of illustrates it better than this definition does. So let's look at examples. So this first one came from a Katy Perry song that you probably know. She says, "'Cause baby, you're a firework. Come on, show 'em what you're worth." So the comparison that's made here between two very unlike things or concepts would be you, or whoever she's addressing in the song, and a firework. So a person is being compared to a firework, okay, which are two very different things. And I'll talk to you next about how to break these down and analyze them. This next example says, "This assignment is a breeze." Okay, so what's compared to what? An assignment is compared to a breeze. Coach was so angry he was breathing fire. This one is a little bit trickier. We know that Coach is what's being compared to something else. What is he being compared with? Some might say fire, but is it really what he's being compared to? He was so angry, what he was doing was breathing fire. So we have to ask ourselves, what breathes fire? That would be the great mythological dragon. So actually what Coach is being compared to here is a dragon. And this is the example from the previous video. These shoes are fire. Shoes are being compared to fire. It's a direct comparison. So let's talk about how to analyze these, okay? This is how we break these down. I kind of did this naturally as I was going through the examples. You have to decide first. There are two questions to answer. So this is how you analyze. Answer these questions. What specifically is being compared to what? And then the follow-up question is, what do those things have in common? In other words, why is the writer or speaker comparing these two things? What is it bringing out? What traits, common traits, are they trying to point out to us? So let's look back briefly at one of these examples. Let's look at this first one, Katy Perry. Okay, a person, her baby, or whoever baby is in this case, is compared to a firework. So what are the traits? This is us asking these questions. What's compared to what? We figured that out. What do these things have in common? Well, we don't know the person they're talking about, but we can learn about what this person is like if we analyze what are the traits that a firework has that somebody might put onto a person. So some traits of a firework. A firework is bright, okay, explosive, beautiful to look at, loud. So any or all of those traits are the traits that Katy Perry is trying to say that this person has. They put on a show, maybe, because the next line is show them what you're worth. So that's how we analyze a metaphor. We ask, what does this one thing have that the other thing also has? What do they have in common? So let's do that with another one. This assignment is a breeze. So what are some traits of a breeze that we could apply to an assignment that would help us better understand what this person is saying? Well, a breeze is easy breezy, okay? A breeze feels good, it's fast, goes by fast. So maybe those are the traits that this person is trying to describe the assignment with. So speaking of how to analyze, this is the worksheet that you're filling out. This is your assessment, ultimately. So let's read the directions and I'll show you how to do this for metaphor. The directions say, as you read your independent reading books, keep your eyes out for examples of the types of figurative language that you took notes over. You may choose to use sticky notes to mark quotes during reading time, or you can just have a little piece of paper and jot down page numbers of quotes that you want to revisit during work time. And that's exactly what I did, by the way. I just kind of kept all of these terms up here in mind as I was reading, and when I spotted one, I just threw in a sticky note so that it wouldn't interrupt my reading so much and I could still enjoy my book. And then later on, I went back and looked at my sticky notes and copied those quotes down. So that's how I would suggest you do that so you can still enjoy your book and it's not getting disrupted so much. During work time, copy the quotes and page numbers into the table below, and then analyze and explain the figurative language contained in each quote. So, you maybe right now, as you start this, you are near the end of a book. And so maybe you get a couple of these figurative language pieces out of one book, and then you start a new book and you get the rest out of the second book. Maybe you even find these in 3 different books you're reading. It depends on how fast you read, how long the books are. Some books are going to have more of these than others, but I guarantee you probably within one book you could find all 5 of these. I'd be very surprised if you couldn't. Now, I was kind of in that situation where I was near the end of one book. I was reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which I highly recommend. I had already read it. I was rereading it with my daughter. And so I got some out of that book by J.K. Rowling. And then I started The Wheel and the School by Meindert de Jong, I think is how you say it. He's Dutch, I believe. Anyway, so I got some out of that book as well. And so I'll show you how I kind of specified. So right now we're just looking at metaphor. So here is an example of a metaphor I found in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It says, Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. Okay, a key word here, and this might have, if you don't know what a crane is, then maybe this escaped your attention, but a crane is a type of bird. And so this is more of an indirect metaphor. Remember the examples we went over here when Coach was described as a dragon, but the word dragon never appeared. He was kind of compared to a dragon based on the action that he was described as carrying out. Well, that's how Mrs. Dursley is described as a crane or a type of bird here. She's craning her neck, okay, which means extending her long neck over garden fences so that she can spy on her neighbors. Okay, and I put my page number here. And now here's where I analyze it. What does it mean? So this is exactly where these questions are going to come into play. I'm going to answer these questions. What's compared to what? And what do those things have in common? Okay, so here I would say Mrs. Dursley is described as a crane, which is a type of long-necked bird. So I answered the first question. The second question is, what do these things have in common? So now I have to decide, what does a crane and Mrs. Dursley have in common? Okay. Both the crane and Mrs. Dursley have long necks. I'm going to address the author by name. I'm going to say J.K. Rowling probably used this description of her to emphasize that she is nosy. Okay? which makes sense because this line here says she spies on the neighbors. So that's all I have to do here for analysis. If I did just this column on all of these, the maximum amount that I could get on the proficiency scale would be a 3. This explain column is how you're going to start reaching for a 4. So this asks, how does the context of the story and the meaning of the figurative language influence each other? That question might confuse you a little bit, so let me put it in other words. So in this context, I'm going to be asking myself, based on what I know about Mrs. Dursley, why is this a good description of her? Or how does this description of her, which is early on in the story, influence how I see her for the rest of the book? Okay? So there's a word you kind of need to know for this to make a whole lot of sense. The word connotation, okay? Something can have a positive connotation or a negative connotation. If something has a positive connotation, it means it's a positive sort of thing, and negative meaning negative. So just based on this description of her craning over fences and spying on neighbors, I would say that that has a negative connotation, okay? If you were described as craning to spy on other people, you'd probably think, oh, that's not a very nice way to describe me, okay? So I'm going to say this description has a negative connotation, which makes sense with the rest of the story. Mrs. Dursley is very mean to Harry, who is the protagonist, meaning he is the main character that the story revolves around. He's moving the action forward. So we are supposed to, as readers, be sympathetic to Harry, not Mrs. Dursley. So the fact that she is mean to Harry, who is our protagonist, means that we are meant to see her in a negative light. Let's see. I would say this is probably good. You don't have to go on and on. If you can give me a sentence or two that just kind of broadens this quote, to the rest of the story and tells me, because I am your reader for this, that you understand how that description fits in with the rest of the story, then you've probably gone far enough. So that is a metaphor in a nutshell, and how you can analyze and explain a metaphor.